Have you ever given much thought to the idea that the spoils in life go to the risk takers? If you'll give it some thought, I think you'll come up with the same solution I arrived at. A survey indicated that 98% of the men in the country are looking for security in their work. That is, they're mainly interested in losing themselves deep in the warm, nourishing viscera of some large corporation, which is fine. I'm not knocking it. I'm just commenting on it. But these are not, as a rule, the risk takers. They're more the play-it-safers. And while they can have good and successful careers all their working lives, the chances are against they're hitting the big jackpot. Now, the reason I say this is because this sort of life, as a rule, does not encourage a man to do much more than he has to do. And he'll usually spend his free time, which comes to something like 72 hours a week when he's neither working nor sleeping, in pursuits not calculated to help him get ahead in the world. Now, the man who risks his spare time writing a book, painting pictures, fiddling with inventions, continuing his education, is generally the one in this kind of milieu who will advance above his fellows. But the man who risks all of his time on a goal he wants to reach, on a dream in his heart, who stakes his livelihood and the livelihood of his family upon his own brains and the proper use of his time, and tackles the world single-handed, here's the risk-taker to whom the spoils will generally accrue. Now, I'm not talking about the impractical dreamer and stargazer. I'm talking about the man of action who gets out and raises the dust in the world. He might take some king-sized pratfalls and be snickered at by friends and relatives of a more conservative bent, but he'll usually make the grade if he stays with it, and earn their admiration, if not envy, before he's through. You know, one of the biggest factors in his favor is the size of the group he belongs to. According to the most reliable figures I can find, this risk-taker belongs to only about 2% of the population. And since he's generally working on an idea that will in some way serve the big 98%, the odds swing rather favorably to his side. Additionally, a man on his own must think. He must devote more of his days to thinking. Conversely, the man with a good, steady job who's familiar with his work and surroundings can go along pretty well from day to day without doing any creative thinking at all. And as I said, we have a tendency to do no more than we have to. Anybody who spends a good deal of his time thinking is going to come up with a good idea once in a while. The law of averages is definitely on his side. And if you think about it a minute, you'll realize that he only needs a few, maybe only one really good idea to make it big. Now, the more you think about it and analyze it, the more it makes you think that what appears to be the risk-taker really isn't nearly as big a risk-taker as you might imagine. The cards are stacked pretty well for him from several important standpoints. But as I said in the beginning, the spoils definitely go to the risk-taker. Life is full of hidden contradictions. One is that the man who thinks he's playing it safe really isn't. And the man who seems to be taking the greatest risks, considering the law of averages, is playing it safest.
People who do well in the world, being creative and willing to take a calculated risk, are people who manage to overcome the fear of laughter. Anytime you attempt anything in which you risk failure, you run the risk of having people laugh at you. A college professor worked for many years on an invention. He tramped all over New England trying to interest capital in his device for making the human voice travel along a wire. The people laughed at him. It was, of course, plumb idiotic, they said, to suppose that the human voice could be carried along a wire and heard for many miles or even for a single mile. But our old friend and benefactor Alexander Graham Bell could not be laughed out of it, and every time we pick up the telephone, we salute the man who stayed on course despite the laughter. Millions of people laughing in derision could not hurt us an iota, but we stand in mortal terror of it. Men and women who can prove themselves heroes in great crises tremble before derision. It's a queer quirk of human nature we probably develop as children. It has cost much. It's changed the history of the world. Sometimes the price of a laugh has meant the slamming of a door of fame and fortune, or even immortality. Elias Howe invented the sewing machine, but it nearly rusted away before the American women stopped laughing about it and could be persuaded to make use of it. With their sewing done so quickly, they argued, what would they ever do with all their spare time? So a biographer paints a tragic picture. The man who had done more than any other to lighten the work of women was forced to borrow a suit of clothes on an occasion of a public appearance. Men are as bad as women when it comes to resisting new ideas. The typewriter had been a demonstrated success for years before businessmen could be persuaded to buy it. How could anyone have letters to write, they argued, to justify the investment of $100 in a writing machine? Only when the Remingtons sold patent rights to the Telegraph Company and two groups of salesmen worked in competition was the resistance finally broken down. Xerography faced the same kind of problem when it was first introduced, and other inventions have had similar battles. Here's an extract from a notebook of Robert Fulton, who invented the steamship, who changed the world from sail to steam on the oceans of the world. He wrote, "As I had occasion daily to pass to and from the shipyard where my boat was in progress, I often loitered near the groups of strangers and heard various remarks as to the object of this new vehicle. The language was uniformly that of scorn, sneer, or ridicule. The loud laugh often rose at my expense, the dry jest, the wise calculations of losses or expenditures, the dull repetition of Fulton's folly. Never did a single encouraging remark, a bright hope, a warm wish cross my path. Never did a single encouraging remark, a bright hope, a warm wish cross my path." And that's about what you can expect when you try something new. Success, as far as a person is concerned, does not lie in achievement. It lies in striving, reaching, attempting. Any person who decides upon a course of action he deems to be worthy of him and sets out to accomplish that goal is a success right then and there. Therefore, failure consists not in failing to reach our goals, but rather in not establishing them. Failure consists of not trying, and certainly Melville and all the others who were not recognized until long after their deaths were successful during their lives because of the fact that they strove all of their lives and gave to their work the best that was in them. And for every Melville that we read about, there have been millions of men and women equally successful, of whom we'll never hear. People who didn't write books or try to save the world, but who, in their own quiet way, in their own places, gave to what they had chosen the best that was in them. Melville must have known deep within himself when he finished the last page of Moby Dick that he had not failed, just as each of us knows how much of himself he's giving to what it's been given him, what he has chosen to do.
People who play it too safe take the greatest risks. Did you know that? In the long haul, the intelligent risk-takers develop the greatest security. It's a wise person who learns the importance of risk-taking. During World War II, psychologist E. Paul Torrance made a study of United States aces flying in the Pacific Theater of Operations. He reported that the most salient characteristic of the ace was his risk-taking ability. Throughout his life, he had kept testing the limits of his abilities, and the life histories of these men showed that they were highly resistant to accidents, and in combat they suffered fewer casualties than pilots who were inclined to play it safe. Dr. Torrance said, "Living itself is a risky business. If we spent half as much time learning how to take risks as we spend avoiding them, we wouldn't have nearly so much to fear in life." In all walks of life, the most successful people are the risk-takers. Now, by that I mean they risk believing in their own ideas, striking out toward their own goals, standing up for what they believe to be right. They take the risk of being different when they believe in something. Now, this has a tendency to make the going a little tougher for a while, but they almost always wind up ahead of the game eventually. Risk-takers realize there's nothing wrong with an occasional failure. The play-it-safers seem to think a failure means the end of the world.
Almost every thinking, growing, maturing person can find the work he enjoys. And for the rest, the deep sources of satisfaction and interest can come from experiences not connected with their work. For some, their work is the very mainstay of their lives. For others, it's simply the means to an end. Many people are quite content to not work at all. Most retired people enjoy their retirement and wouldn't change things for the world. But for some, active, mind-engaging work is as necessary as food and drink. For many women, running a home, raising their children, caring for their husbands, and 1,001 things necessary to that life are more than enough for all the satisfaction they need. They're quite content with their lives, as they should be. For other women, such a life is unthinkable, the way to madness. They need other interests, other lives. To expect that 50% of the human race should be content with keeping house and raising a family is ridiculous. It's as ridiculous as it would be to expect all men to be lawyers or bricklayers. A woman can want the love and companionship of a man and perhaps a family, without at the same time having an aptitude or even an interest in keeping house. She might prefer to be a brain surgeon, a teacher, a business executive, or any one of the 200,000 possible occupations in our society. We've been taught to live within our means, and it's good advice for a company, a country, or a person. But what are our means? Have we explored our means? Do we know what our real means are? People say a person shouldn't reach beyond his capacity. It'll only end in frustration and disappointment. What is a person's capacity? How's he to find out what it is unless he reaches? The man and wife in the so-called average home on an average street in an average town haven't the faintest notion as a rule that they can sit down at the kitchen table, make a list of everything they want, number the items on the list in the order of their importance to them, and then get everything on that list in 5 years, certainly in 10. An American labor leader once commented that the American people can have anything they want. The trouble is that they don't know what they want, and this most certainly applies to income. A British survey team discovered that the average American family believes that happiness can be guaranteed with a 20% increase in income. It's obvious that most people haven't the foggiest notion as to what constitutes happiness. How does a person increase his income to the point where it more comfortably meets his needs, his present needs, and his savings and investment needs for the future? A good first step is to realize that everything we want, other people have, and will give us if we earn it. $1 from just 10% of the families in the United States would come to $7 million. Our income is in the hands of others. If our income is not what we want it to be, we must examine our product and our management. We have failed to qualify for it, or have lacked the courage and ideas to go after it. Thoreau said, "We have only to move confidently in the direction of our dreams to meet with a success unexpected in common hours." Interesting idea, isn't it? There's an exciting, renewing idea. We have only to move confidently in the direction of our dreams to meet with a success unexpected in common hours. The direction of our dreams is often nothing more than our genetic instructions, than our subconscious, our natural propensities, whatever we want to call it, trying to point us in the right direction. The minute we begin to move in the direction that's right for us, things start going our way. We begin to get lucky, as they say. So we need to ask ourselves, am I moving in the direction of my dreams? Or am I playing lockstep with millions of other people because of some stereotyped idea I picked up from people who don't know any more than I do, maybe less? People who perhaps have not proved in their own lives that they're experts when it comes to living successfully. Eric Hoffer put it pretty well when he said, "We're taught not to waste time and raised to waste our lives." Something to think about. So a person, standing back and assessing the three main departments of his life, and understanding that his fortunes are the fruit of his character, gets a pretty good look at himself as manager of himself and whatever else he manages. I think, too, that it's a good idea to reassess our priorities from time to time. What is really important and what isn't? The mature person has this question pretty well straight in his mind. His goals, his needs are his own. They do not necessarily mirror those of the majority of other people. I think we'd be safe to say that with the mature person, his goals and what he considers to be important in his life will not be those held by the majority. The fact that he has goals sets him apart. It's good to remember, where our businesses are concerned, where our lives are concerned, it's quality and balance. It's living in balance that counts, that gets the best results, always. We'll live longer and in better health, do better, and enjoy it more. Unless we're doing piecework, it isn't the time we put in, it's the ideas we get and put to work. Everything we see about us that's man-made was once an idea in the mind of one person. Our ideas can be just as good. It takes maturity to realize that, as a rule, happiness and contentment do not come when we reach our goals. We're amazed to find that we were happier, more contented when we were striving toward them. I remember reading a comment by a New York University professor that went something to the effect that while dissatisfaction may be uncomfortable, the real disasters in life occur when we get what we want. He was referring to some of the larger goals of society, but the same thing often applies to us as persons. When we stop striving towards something new, something we find worthwhile and interesting, we begin to die. It's believed that's why teachers, scientists, writers, philosophers, farmers, and others who constantly have something new to look forward to tend to live such long, healthy lives. The teacher has a new class every year. The scientist is always working on a new, tough problem. The writer has a new book or article to do. The philosopher is forever uncovering new, interesting information, fresh ideas. And the farmer has the renewal of new crops and animals about him, a new season to work toward. Many others fit into the same category. Those who do not tend to live shorter lives. With no new place to go, they simply stop sooner. A generalization, of course, but it tends to work out. Incidentally, heart attacks, contrary to popular opinion, are not common among leaders in business and industry, in government and education. The leaders usually enjoy excellent health and have learned to live in balance. It's the people in the levels below the top who permit themselves to be skimmed off years before their time. It's been said that a heart attack is nature's way of telling us to slow down or change our habits, or both. It's a rude lesson, often fatal, but that's nature's way. How did Huxley put it? He compared living to playing a game of chess with an invisible opponent who's always strictly fair and just, but who never overlooks a mistake. If we play ill, he said, we are checkmated, without haste, but without remorse. And to those who play well, they're rewarded with the overflowing generosity with which the strong delight in strength. Living in balance, in anything, is the way to play the game well. How did James Allen put it? A calm, strong life is like a shade-giving tree in a thirsty land, a sheltering rock in a storm. You know, it's only when we're calm and at peace with ourselves that the good ideas tend to come. I think that's why we so often get our best ideas early in the morning or while doing something that's totally routine, such as shaving, showering, driving the car, or walking alone. Most people do not do much creative thinking, you know. In fact, they've been put down so many times as youngsters they've learned to distrust their own ideas, doubt their own ability to get worthwhile ideas. Our mind, and no one knows what the mind is, incidentally, or even where it is. The ancient Greeks thought for a while it was located in the liver. Our mind comes as standard equipment at birth. But since the demands put upon it are relatively small and it's not required to come up with new ideas, it soon falls into disuse. As with anything else, what we don't use, we tend to lose. And so it's easy to forget or never learn that we own free and clear the most amazing agency ever to appear on earth, the human mind, all of it, whatever it is, subconscious and conscious, seeming to draw as it does on the mysterious stuff of the universe, past and present. You know, there's a system for creative thinking, perhaps you're familiar with it. First, you define the problem, put it on paper. Quite often, just defining it leads to a solution. The next step is to begin gathering data with regard to the idea. We need to find out all we can about the possible ways in which such an idea might be solved. We need to read about it, talk to people who've had similar problems, find out all we can about it. Next, we need to write down possible solutions. Think about possible solutions. Turn the problem every way but loose. Worry it like a puppy with a slipper. The mind is like a supercomputer. It'll work on a problem while we're doing other things. Let it cook as long as it needs to, and then, one bright morning, if you're like I am, it'll usually wake you up at about 4 in the morning. The answer will pop into your mind as clear and simple and perfect as anything you ever saw in your life. You then yell Eureka, leap out of bed, and write the answer down on a piece of paper as fast as you can. If you don't, the idea can slip away as quietly and mysteriously as it came, and you can spend the next 20 years trying to recall it. The next step is to put the solution to work and stay with it to completion. Don't try to play it too safe. Nobody ever got to second base trying to keep one foot on first. Either you have confidence in your ideas or you don't. Getting good ideas is only about 10% of the job. The 90% is the follow-through. The person who will follow a good idea through to completion is one of the most valuable people in our society. Every problem is an opportunity. Our opportunities are an exact ratio to our problems. We have great national problems. Therefore, we have correspondingly great national opportunities. The bigger the problem, the better the opportunity. Problem, pollution. Great industries employing many hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of people will be built upon the problems of air, land, noise, and water pollution. Problem, population. Population means people, and whether you're serving their growing needs or helping them to hold their numbers in check, you've got opportunities. Millions are already being earned in these problem areas. There seem to be two main classifications of people in the world, the big group, which is made up of those who are part of the problem, and the small group made up of those who are part of the answer. Which group we choose to be in is up to us. A professor at MIT has said, the changes taking place in the world today are not merely changes from one form of society, one form of technology to another. They're so wide-sweeping that they're taking us from one major epoch of human history into another. We are in an order of change which is completely different from anything our ancestors knew, unless we go back 10,000 years when they invented property, ownership, work and mechanics based on the wheel. Change. Unprecedented, amazing change, and you and I are right in the middle of it. For some, change represents a threat to the status quo. For others, it represents unprecedented opportunity. For me, and I hope for you, change always represents new opportunities for growth, development, for the setting of new goals, for the moving on to new vistas, for the fresh breath of renewal. We don't know much about anything really, but most of the top people in the disciplines touching on human conduct seem to be certain of two major points. One, the average healthy person functions at a fraction of his true capacity, and two, that the most exciting lifelong adventure is bringing more of our real powers to bear in our lives.